Hello, my name is Nissa and welcome to our first installment of our Ultimate Arctic Small Ship Cruising webinar series. Today we will go through a few of general Arctic questions that you may have, and also we've got a specialist or an expert on board who knows a little bit about Iceland, having travelled there almost, I think, 4 times. We'll find out about that in a minute. But before we start, let's just grab our bearings and just place ourselves on that world map. So where is the Arctic? Just a little refresher. It's the northernmost part of the Earth surrounding the North Pole. Unlike Antarctica, it's not a continent, but it's made up of the Arctic Ocean, the nearby seas, and several different territories, including parts of the USA in Alaska, Canada, Russia, Denmark, as in Greenland, Finland, Iceland, Sweden, Norway, as in Spitsbergen or the Svalbard archipelago. So why do people travel to the Arctic? Here are some of the top reasons why our clientele travel to the Arctic: because of its remote and unique landscapes, such as glaciers, fjords, ice flows, snow-capped mountains, sheer cliffs, which are varied and definitely otherworldly. The wildlife is a big incentive for people to travel to the Arctic. A lot of people want to tick off seeing polar bears in the wild, the reindeer, walrus, Arctic fox, whales, and of course the unique bird life. Another reason people travel to the Arctic is the Indigenous culture, so meeting and learning from Inuit communities. And there's also the lure of the Northern Lights and the midnight sun, which our special guest today will go into a little bit more, because I know that's on the bucket list as well for a lot of the Arctic travelers out there. And of course, in the true spirit of expedition, the North Pole, many people want to follow in those footsteps of those bygone explorers and place their feet on the North Pole. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Neil Saunders, Business Development Manager here at Wild Earth Travel. Neil, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at Wild Earth?
Hello, everyone. Greetings from a freezing cold Adelaide this morning. Yeah, I've been with Wild Earth about 10 years now, or maybe even longer. Luckily been in the industry about 30 years and have traveled all over. Lived in the UK for about 15 years, 16 years all up. And for my sins up there, I used to run a Arctic adventure company up that way. So yeah, been to Iceland 4, maybe 5 times. Can't quite remember. And luckily have been there both winter and summer. So I can talk a bit about both there. But what I do is travel Australia primarily, talking about small ship and expedition cruising and the range that we have with Wild Earth. That's me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Neil. And I know you're well placed to answer some of these common Arctic questions. Before we get into your presentation, let's just knock them on the head. If you could explain these 4 points to us, please.
Too easy. So polar bears. Dare I say, unfortunately, guys, if you're going to Iceland, you're not going to see a polar bear. There are no polar bears in Iceland. The ice flows mean that the bears can't actually get to Iceland because it's too far away. But the polar bears are definitely all over the Arctic Circle. Number one spots really are Norway, Svalbard, Greenland, Canada, and also the Russian Arctic. Obviously, the Russian Arctic is a no-go zone for a little bit, so we won't talk about that. But with Svalbard and Northern Norway, Greenland and Canada, you've got a very good chance of seeing them. Prime time to see them sort of June to October when they're out and about hunting. And then the rest of the winter, they tend to be hidden away. So there's a few options with small ship cruising that hopefully get you out there to see those as well as a combination of land and sea. Northern Lights. Now, on the other hand, Iceland is possibly one of the greatest places to see the Northern Lights. Northern Lights, quick fallacy. Everyone goes, they're only there in the winter. The Northern Lights are there year round. You just need a couple of things to go your way. So you need darkness, which doesn't help when you've got nearly 24 hours of sunlight in the summer. So hence why June, July, very hard to see them. You need no cloud cover. Another thing we've got to worry about. to get there, and ideally no sort of residual light, so no street lighting or things like that. The bonus of Iceland is that you can probably see the northern lights from September through to about April. So in terms of the season when we're cruising and when we're expedition cruising up that way, it tends to be the early season and the late season trips that you've got a chance to see the northern lights. Any of the trips that combine Iceland and Greenland, you've probably got a better chance as well because you're going to be in the open ocean up there. So, but definitely tick a box. I have been lucky. I've seen it multiple times and various different ways, whether it's been on a ship or on land, or even halfway down a crack in the earth, sitting in a 45-degree hot pool of water, looking up at the sky in the middle of winter in Iceland. So it's pretty special when they do come through. The dancing sky essentially is there. Packing list. Oh, that's easy. What do I need to bring? Bring layers. Best way to travel, even in summer, is layers. You can actually get some warmish days, and warmish days for them is up to 20 degrees, but it's quite a lot warmer than you expect. Generally, summer is, and especially in the ocean out there, is between 10 and 20 degrees in the summer. But layers is the best way to go. Waterproof over trousers for those wet landings, hopefully, things like that. Now, some of the companies we work with provide you with a nice warm jacket, which you'll either get to keep or use while you're on the ship. So that's quite handy. But I do recommend that you just bring, something that you're comfortable wearing. And for any of the wet landings, so when you're on a Zodiac and you've got to get off into a little bit of water, usually ankle deep water, all the ships provide you with gumboots or welly boots, whichever way you want to call them, to use while you're on the ship. So they always get your foot size beforehand, and then you just leave them on the ship. So you don't actually have to pack them in your luggage, which is a bonus. In terms of luggage, it's dictated really by the airline. So it's about 23 kilos, whatever the airline states in terms of that. On the ship, they don't mind how much you bring on, but it's how much you can carry with the airlines. And then the average length of cruises. So the vast majority of cruises are pretty much between 8 to 15 days. So 1 week to 2 weeks. So if you're looking at an Arctic holiday, essentially, you're going to look at 2 to 3 weeks as a standard rule. Allowing for travel time up, and plus you might want some downtime in some of the capitals, or you might want to combine a couple of trips. So you could do 1 week of cruising, say in Iceland, and then go and do some land, and then go up to maybe Svalbard or something like that. But the general rule is 1 to 2 weeks. Anything that combines a couple of countries, so there's a couple of itineraries that do the 3 Arctic islands, which is Greenland, Svalbard, and Iceland, you're looking at around a 2-week trip. So that hopefully answers all your questions that you need to know about Arctic and small ship cruising, expedition cruising up there.
Yeah, fantastic, Neil. I think that's a good lay of the land to get into your presentation. So what I'll do is I'll stop sharing now and I'll allow you to share your slides so that we can see all your photos from your Iceland trips.
Now, is that working yet?
It should be.
Let's just check. Can everyone see that okay?
Not yet.
Not yet. Hang on.
We did practice this beforehand.
We did practice and it worked.
It did work. So we will.
There we go.
Here we go. Yes.
There we go. We're on.
Okay.
All righty. So let's get into it and talk a bit about small ship cruising. It's the perfect shot, really. This was a shot taken sort of in October time up in Iceland. Where you get that fantastic, especially in the north of Iceland, up near Reykjavik, you get these fantastic sort of dancing skies with the background there. So that one was taken from the ship. But let me quick sort of intro into small ship cruising. The bonus with expedition small ship cruising, get you anywhere. So from the big cities. So this is a shot from London, of all places, where the Sea Spirit, which you can see there, and we'll talk about that a bit later, is parked up in London. So you can actually, when they say to start the cruise in London, you start in London for once. But it's about getting out and seeing things. So to the other end of the world, you ideally in Antarctica is the best way to see it is by small ship cruising, and you hopefully get out and amongst it and see things. But you can see that Zodiacs are the way that you get on and off the ship, as you'll see there. Or it's something a little bit different. You're looking at Mediterranean stuff, warm water stuff. So you've got the Kimberley. This isn't a small ship, so don't worry, but this is what it's all about. It's about meeting Indigenous populations, meeting the different people all over the world. And Iceland is no exception to the rule. So let's kick into a bit of Iceland and what you need to know about Iceland. So as you'll see, in the middle of the Arctic, Iceland is sort of halfway in between sort of the United Kingdom, Norway, and Greenland. It's set alone by itself up there, so it has unique sort of patterns and weather up there. And you can see, as you can see from the Arctic, it's the North Pole was the middle of the ice, and then the Arctic travel area is all around it. Coming into Iceland, probably the best way is to circumnavigate Iceland, and there's multiple different companies that we work with that do that. All the trips tend to start in Reykjavik. There's a port right smack bang downtown in Reykjavik, which is great. And then they'll circumnavigate the islands, ticking off all the sort of key areas. Snæfellsnes is the famous Icelandic volcano that shut down the world for about 3 months when it had a volcanic ash wall going back 10 years ago, maybe 15 even. And then you're moving north to Isafjorda, which is one of the big fishing areas. And up there, you've got herring museums and things like that. Moving around to the north, in that sort of deep crevice there, where one of the dots is, it's not named as Akureyri, which is the northernmost town, and Húsavík, which is your main spot to go whale watching from. And the whale watching season up there is pretty much runs from May through to October. And you're almost guaranteed to see some of the biggest whales in the world out there, as well as some of the smallest. And then further around to sort of the west coast, which is a little bit quieter, a little bit more remote, more farming villages and things like that, but good chances for Icelandic ponies before you finish back in Reykjavik. So Iceland, pretty simple. It's the land of fire and ice. That's what it's named for. It was sort of first discovered when the Vikings moved north around the 9th century, I'm pretty sure. And for many years, it was Old Norse, and they still believe in Viking mythology and Norse gods. And it's a real dichotomy of a place. But you've got these fantastic glacial areas, as well as various mountain peaks that you'll run through, and it is stunning. It is a volcanic country. It is technically it's the fastest growing country in the world, geographically, because it's still growing because of the volcanic nature of the island. And there's Snæfell in its glory, without just smoking away, and you continually what we see it smoking away all year. As I said, Icelandic area is stunning. The rural areas are stunning. You get these vistas, which are amazing. The bonus also of Iceland is that you're going to find hot pools all over the place, whether they're crevices in the earth or the more traditional Blue Lagoon, which is down near Reykjavik, which pretty much everybody does with a stop on the way to Reykjavik from the airport. It's about halfway. And you can spend a couple of hours there just sort of rejuvenating and soaking up the atmosphere. Hopefully you get this beautiful light if you're there sort of early morning or late afternoon. And probably the #1 tourist attraction in Iceland, with about 1.7 million visitors a year. So, but it's well worth it. And the restaurant there is probably a Michelin star status, I think. I'm not sure if it is officially, but the food there is pretty good. So it's worth doing that stop to and from. And then into the capital, Reykjavik. Now, you'll get some of my really dodgy photos coming in here, so bear with me. But Iceland is a very small capital. The vast majority of the population, so it's 380,000 people live in Iceland. Pretty much 300,000 live near Reykjavik. So it is the biggest capital. The current sort of Icelandic tradition is that they're a modern country that believe in their Old Norse gods, but they're also, as you'll see, the huge Lutheran church there, which you can't miss when you're in Iceland. It's enormous. Get this fantastic views, and the real combination of the two. Nearly 3/4 of the population are actually part of the Lutheran church up there. So it's a real mix of old and new, but then you get these fantastic fishing villages. So this is Húsavík, straight up the north, and this is where you'll do your whale watching from. So as you see, dominated by again another Lutheran church, but these beautiful wooden buildings with the backdrops, which are unbelievable. And it's also about getting off the beaten track and getting out and exploring, and you'll find wrecks and ruins and things like that, where you'll hopefully get these beautiful vistas. So just so you know, I took this photo with an iPhone, nothing special about my camera on this one, just hit it at the right time. But let's talk about what a lot of people don't realize that Iceland's got. Even though it doesn't have polar bears, it has a massive amount of flora and fauna. Some introduced species, in fact, quite a few introduced species, one of them being the Icelandic pony, but it's one of the more robust ponies and horses in the world. You potentially have a chance to go for a ride and explore on one of the beachfronts with one of the tours, one of the cruises that we do, to the Arctic fox. And I love showing this photo because this is a juvenile Arctic fox in the summer and it's brown. Everyone goes, what? They're white. So as they get older, and when the winter comes, they turn into that, which is pretty special. Now, they are very hard to find on the island. So if you do see one, it's pretty lucky. We're very lucky with that brown one. He was just sitting by some sort of geothermal areas and just keeping warm one of the summers. Didn't actually move too much. You get nice and close with that one. And through to reindeer, has one of the biggest reindeer populations. And again, all these three species were introduced to the island, so they're not natural there. Their biggest natural is the marine life that they have up there, but well worth seeing it and a lot to see and do. Bird life, there's something like 70 species of birds that are endemic to the island, that breed on the island. Probably the most famous is the puffin, the bottle-wort bird world. They do take great photos. You can get really close and personal with certain spots on the island, and hopefully you get shots like this. But they're probably the sort of the major species of the island. And then you move into Arctic terns and snowy eagles or falcons, sorry. So they're harder to spot, but when you're on the ship, you've got a better chance of seeing them, as well as the sort of major sea life, marine life birds that you see up there. But it's probably the marine life, which is the big draw card to Iceland. So whether it's the striped dolphins, and this is probably the biggest, and this is one of my shots, so it's a bit blurry, but they're sort of the largest population of dolphins, and you'll see them all over the island, especially when you head north. And I think they've got 6 or 8 species of dolphin around the island, some white-beaked dolphins, short-beaked dolphins, bottlenose, rissos, and things like that. But they also have harbour I'll never say this right, porpoises, which is one of the smallest dolphin species in the world. And you can see this out of Reykjavik harbour. So these guys are tiny and compared to a dolphin, about half the size. And you'll see them in the north, in Húsavík as well, Ísafjörður, but also even around Reykjavik. And then obviously we're talking going to the bigger species up there. So you have fin whales, second largest whale species in the world. Blue whales, the largest whale species in the world. So you can tick off some really big species items, hopefully when you see them, to humpbacks. And they got minkies as well. And I think from memory, right whales as well running through there. But probably the biggest challenge up there, and these guys you do see quite often, is the orca, which is technically a dolphin. But you'll see them in packs hunting, and hopefully you get shots like this. So just so you know, this is one of my shots, and it was one of 300 shots I took on the day, and it's about the best I got. But the bonus was it's one of those rare curl-tailed orcas. But we were on the small ship. The captain saw the dolphins, saw the orca, and went, "Oh, well, let's go and have a look." And he sort of told everyone was sort of lazing around having lunch on the back of the ship. I said, "The party's up the front, let's go and have a look at them." So we went up, and there were close to 300 orca hunting. So we spent about an hour just watching them, and that's the bonus for expedition cruising, small ship stuff. They also have large seal populations, harbour seals, things like that, but they're very hard to spot. So the seals are one of those things that you only really see from the ocean side. Now, random, you're going to say, why have I got sheep there? The Icelandic sheep are quite famous. Again, an introduced species, but they've now become a standalone species. And the reason I'm throwing this is that probably a lot of people talk to me about Icelandic cuisine and how it's very weird and odd and things like that. It's some of the best lamb in the world and some of the best cod in the world, fishing-wise. So Iceland was born out of fishing primarily, the herring, the cod, and things like that. But the lamb species up there are unique. So if you do get a chance to try it, or if you want to try something very different, and this is completely off the charts, is the petrified dried shark. In the north, you'll see these shark smoking or shark hanging things where they're just drying over volcanic earth. To say it's a unique taste is an understatement. If you are there, you've got to try it once to say, yeah, I've tried it. But yeah, the dried shark meat is definitely a delicacy up that way. They do say if you get it right and if you meet the right person, they can hopefully get you some of the petrified shark meat, which is sort of 100-year-old meat, and you have it with a bit of Brennivin, which is their local drink up there. And they mix that. You mix the Brennivin with Coke or coffee, and they call it the Black Death, and you have petrified shark. So a little bit different, a little bit interesting. But yeah, in terms of food, it's probably some of the best food you'll get up there. And with the Expedition small ship stuff, they do really try and hit the local cuisine and especially the fish up that way. So what I'll do is I'm going to go through very quickly and talk briefly about the different ships that we have traveling up that way. And we've got multiple itineraries. I think at last count we had about 50 itineraries that touch or visit Iceland. And Hurtigruten have multiple ships up there. We have a special, which I'll talk about in a minute, with the Fram, which is a 300-passenger expedition vessel that travel through that region and offer some really interesting sort of areas of travel. And the bonus of all the small ship stuff, and pretty much the range in sizes from about 100 to about 300, is that you're going to get on and off a lot. But you've got the Fram, the Sea Venture, which does a fantastic itinerary circumnavigating Iceland at 100 passengers. It's great size. And also a really good itinerary that includes Iceland and Greenland. So you get the fjord systems of Greenland as well as sort of what you see in and around Iceland. To the newer ships that are out in the market, so the National Geographic Endurance. So you add that National Geographic level of expertise, but you've also got the Australian companies like Aurora Expeditions that have the Greg Morton, the Silver Earl, very similar style ships that traveling up that way. To Ponant, the French company, and they have 3 or 4 of their ships at different points in time traveling up that way. The Le Ballot is the one that has the most time up there, but there are ships are identical at about 190 passengers and sort of that luxury expedition. And then while we're keeping with the theme of luxury expedition, Silver Sea also run some fantastic itineraries circumnavigating Iceland. And they visit Iceland, they head out, they've got an itinerary that goes from Iceland through Greenland over to Churchill. So you can combine that sort of bear watching experience along with the wonders of Iceland and the fjord systems of Greenland. And at the end of the season, and this is probably one for people who really want to hopefully tick off that box of seeing the Northern Lights, they do one in late September, which goes from Iceland to New York. So you can cruise on a luxury 200-passenger expedition ship, do some wild stuff with Iceland and Greenland, and then it cruises down and falls into the port of New York. So it's a pretty special opportunity there. And then certainly the Sea Spirit, which is another ship, one of our partner companies up there, do some really good Iceland and Greenland trips. They do the 3 islands, so Svalbard, Iceland, and Greenland. And just because I'm, me and being a salesman, just the last 2 slides to show off to you will be Wild Earth just literally launched 2 days ago. A trip to Scotland, the British Isles and Faroes. As you'll see, that literally launched 2 days ago. This will be an exclusive Wild Earth escorted trip for next year. Early bird pricing is on right now. As you'll see, the little map there where it visits, but it's touching on the Shetlands, Orkneys and Faroes, giving you a taste of all that. And that is me done.
Thanks, Neil. I like the little secret spiel you added in there in true salesman style. Thank you for that presentation. It was great. Great overview of Iceland and how to travel there as well. Just making note of the time. We don't have too much time for questions, but what I will encourage you to do is to pop any questions into the chat, which we can collate and then answer at a later point. But one question I do have for you, Neil, before I flip over back to my slides, is you mentioned previously that you'd been to Iceland in all 4 seasons. So I was wondering, what is your favorite season to go to visit Iceland and why?
Probably late sort of September time. It's the end of summer, starting to get a little darker, so you've got the chance of lights. It's still warm enough to sometimes be in a t-shirt, but it can get quite cold. But it sort of gives you that taste of everything in one go. You can still go out and do the great things like hitting the glaciers and doing some ice climbing and things like that as sort of optional extras, as well as hitting the geothermal pools. But you've got that sort of enough daylight to see things during the day, but then not up for the night to hopefully see the northern lights. So that's probably number one time for me.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. And as you mentioned before, we do have a couple of featured trips that we've picked because they do have early bird specials for 2024. So I'll get you to just run through those two, if I could, Neil, please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me just stop share.
Oh, yeah. Can you see my screen? Oh, yes, you might need to stop sharing.
Yeah, 1 second. Why are you not stopping sharing?
See if this works.
There we go.
Yep.
Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, the Iceland circumnavigation, ideal trip. With this particular one, this is with Hurtigruten on the Fram, the first ship you saw, so 300 passengers, so not big. And it's a fantastic way to discover the whole island. So that itinerary that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, that's what that one is. May is a great time because you sort of the wildlife coming out, August, and then we also have some September departures with another company as well. But the price point on this one is massive, 25% saving. So Aussie 6435 is a great price saving. They have various cabins with external views. And then obviously you've got a Wild Earth exclusive of an extra $150 on board credit, which is great because that goes towards any sort of optional extras you may want to do, excursions, or just use it towards your bar bill, whichever you wish to.
And may I add in there as well, Hurtigruten have been kind enough to extend that onboard credit offer to any of their Arctic sailings for 2023-24. So let us know and then we can book that in with your booking. And then the second one, oh, hang on, I'm just going to try and flip to the next slide, which sometimes, there we go.
And then I talked about this, combining the islands, Iceland and Greenland. So this is with the Sea Venture. This is an Icelandic company that actually run this. So they do the circumnavigation of Iceland, and you've got a multitude of excursions that they offer, which are really unique, you know, from things like the Viking sushi, where you go and literally whatever the sea captain that they've met for the day has caught, the fishing captain, and then he will open it up and you eat it fresh straight out of the ocean, to some fantastic Icelandic pony treks or the whale watching up north in Reykjavik. Then over to the fjordlands, as you'll see down there, the fjordlands of Greenland, which are pretty amazing. And these are fantastic 2-week itineraries. I think 15 to 18 days, 19 days, sorry. So this is where that you're looking at sort of 3-week trip away, but they've got early bird pricing on at the moment, 20% saving. I think that's through to the end of this year. It's either the end of November or even December to get the early birds in for next year. Best time to do Greenland is this June, July period. And then you've got the chance also to combine that polar bear action along with the history and the culture and the marine life of Iceland.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, Neil. As I mentioned, pop the questions in the chat and I'll collate them and we will respond via EDM as we've run out of a time there. If you're interested in any of the trips or you want to know more, please reach out to your travel agent, your preferred travel agent, or give us a buzz. You've got our details there. And yeah, so our next installment next week is on Greenland and Spitsbergen, or the Svalbard archipelago. As we mentioned before, we have a special guest of Granda Spas, who are specialists in the region, and they actually have the unique proposition of actually traversing those areas in a 12-passenger yacht. So if you're interested, please register for our for next week's webinar. I did actually chuck the registration link into the chat. So if you're interested and you haven't registered, jump into the chat and then you can register there. We will have this webinar available up as a recorded link. So please reach out to me if you'd like to receive it sooner rather than later, because our plan for the series was just to do a wrap up at the end, so towards the end of July, where we will give everyone the links all at once. But if you'd like it beforehand, just let me know. And once again, thank you to Neil for your insights. Pop the questions in the chat. I'll stick around for 5 or so minutes and I'll collate them there. And we look forward to seeing you next time. See you later.